I think it currently feels like two different lives because the touring that you do as a poet, it has to be linked financially to scholarly work so that people will, host you, because there is no money in poetry, and poetry it's punishing.
Today I'm joined by somebody I swear to God, I am so hyped to have. And I mean, I'm hyped because if there's anything that I love is being able to predict once you meet a person for the first time. You meet a person for the first time, you go, okay. She doesn't know it, but right now she's smarter than me. Okay. I met I met Dr. Therí Pickens when she was a lowly undergrad at UCLA, and I was like, "Oh, I
Grad
need to
student.
step." Oh, yeah, you were grad student. I'm sorry, but you were grad student. I was like, "I need to pick up my game." And there's only been a few people in my travels that I've ever done that, and we have. We were joking before we started recording. Uh, I have kind of follow her, at various places where if I spoke, like the University of Arizona and things like that. So it is the greatest pleasure to have one of my favorite people. And we normally don't get a chance to talk all the time, but the person who I'm just most proud of. I can't even tell you how much I am so proud of.
Thank
So,
you.
Dr. Therí Pickens, we are welcome to the 20 questions.
Hello, hello, hello.
It's just such a pleasure having you. We're gonna be
Thank you.
talking. We're gonna be talking about because what we talk about at the Right Shade is we buy books, and we
Yes.
don't look at interviews and just think, oh my gosh, she was so wonderful. We want to send Dr. Pickens on a vacation to Jamaica with little, with little
Umbrellas
umbrellas.
and the drinks. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
I
and
received
particularly
that.
and particularly because you teach in Maine,
Hmm.
and you are probably one person that I know who lives in Maine.
Yes. Yes.
so, so how's life been there in comparison to other places?
So I am originally from New Jersey and spent much of my life there. And I will say very particular, especially for people who have strong opinions about North Jersey versus South Jersey. I am from East Orange, Newark, and Maplewood. So that is where I'm from, Essex County, the most densely populated county and the most densely populated state in the Union. So that tells you a little bit about kind of how I roll. And I spent some time in LA for graduate school and a year after doing a visiting gig at Pitzer College. And now I live in Maine. It's very different here.
Mm.
I think, I was just telling this to a friend of mine. You can get priced out of being black in Maine pretty
Wow,
easily.
wow.
So, and by priced out, I mean everything that you would take for granted in a Philly, in a LA, in a Austin, Texas, Dallas, etc. Um, None of that is here. So when I first got here, there were no hair care products on the shelves. I had to import those. I have a disability, so I can't have a manual toothbrush. I need an electric one. There weren't those on the shelves. Um, Went to, when we shopped at Target, went to Target, looked for washcloths. There were none of those on the shelves.
Wow.
So, being priced out of blackness, because all the accoutrement you need to sustain your understanding of yourself just on the daily is not always available. And then also getting my hair done, right? Like
Oh,
that was a struggle for the first couple of years.
oh,
Actually, it still is, but yeah, I mean, being black in Maine it's a huge financial consideration if you take seriously some of the cultural things we take seriously. If you want to abandon those, that makes it a little easier. But yeah, being black in Maine can be more than a notion, as I think, a couple generations above me used to say.
the fact that they don't have washcloths is the thing that just blows my mind.
It was
I,
the most weird experience in Target. I've never been in a Target where I couldn't find everything I wanted and then some.
wow.
Um, Yeah.
That,
So Target
that's
boycott is easy for me.
that's look, I would boycott y'all for the start.
Yes. Yes.
All right. All right. Well, are you ready for the magical 20 questions?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Let's see if you'll be able to survive these. Everybody has been. So let me see if you somehow.
Okay.
Hey everybody. Lawrence Ross here, founder of The Right Shade. Of course, this is the point in time where I ask you to subscribe, like, and comment on each of our videos. But that really has a real effect on the outreach. We're only able to bring you authors, and we're going to try to bring you all the Black authors we possibly can when you are able to do that. And then also, when you decide to make a purchase of one of their books, which are always in the description, that not only helps the authors, but it also helps us to actually pay the bills, because we get a small percentage from every book purchased on our site. So do that. And also, of course, share. What we're trying to do, all of us together, is to make sure that Black books and Black authors always have a platform. All right, question number one. And by the way, I always say I'm from Inglewood, so I may stumble over some words. So we'll go from there. What had happened came out in March 2025, Duke University Press, with your debut poetry collection. You're also the author of a major scholarly monograph. What does it feel like to finally let those poems out into the same world where your academic work lives?
Ooh. So I think the first thing I needed to do in order to write the poems and like release them into the ether was really be clear about the fact that my scholarly self and my poetic self were not two separate people, that the same impulse as an author to be curious, to be connected, to be creative, that those were part of both endeavors. And so that's what needed to happen before the book even was sort of conceptualized. I had to make peace with that and make peace with what that meant for my voice. Because being a poet and being a scholar, they're not diametrically opposed. They're actually quite complementary.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, um, and this hasn't happened yet, but I am anticipating people starting to talk about my poetic work as scholars. So
Oh,
folks who are in the scholarly realm might take up the poetry
right.
and start talking about me like a different kind of author, and
Oh,
start analyzing stuff. And that's the part that I'm not quite ready for.
right.
Um, because I wasn't ready for it as a scholar. Like I've
Yeah.
definitely emailed publications and been like, "That's not what that says. That's not, that's not what that means."
you, you
That's
sitting
just
here talking about apples. I'm talking about Chevrolets.
right, right. Or someone in an article once implied that I was in disagreement with Audre Lorde about something, and I was like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, what's going on with my name?" No, that's not true.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, I think if it currently feels like two different lives because
Yeah.
the touring that you do as a poet, it has to be linked financially to scholarly work so that people will, host you,
Right.
because there is no money in poetry, and
Yeah.
poetry it's punishing.
Yeah.
You very rarely get feedback. You get, oh, this doesn't work for us, as opposed to for scholarly stuff, it's like this doesn't work because of reasons A through Z, and then I'm
Mm.
gonna tack on some appendices, right?
The
So
little small A, B, C on top of
that's that's so it feels like two different worlds, even though internally it's one world. Externally, it currently feels like two different worlds.
It's
So
funny how poetry is devalued because I was lucky enough to spend some time with Nikki Giovanni,
hmm
and she, because of her name in particular, she was one of the rare poets who can obviously have. In fact, right back there, I have a Nikki Giovanni up there. But I mean, the poet laureate of the United States of, I want to 10 years ago, maybe, couldn't get a book deal, and
no.
it's insane. And every time I have writing students who are poets, I'm like, it's extremely valuable in terms of her dialogue or description and building universes. Extremely valuable. but I can't logically tell them that anyone's going to buy their poetry book.
Yeah.
Um, and it's curious. I'm curious. Was Duke and university presses pretty much the one avenue that you could go for, and it was because of your scholarship?
Now, Lawrence, let me tell you what it was to try and get this book published.
Oh,
So, originally, it was called Customary Calculus for Chronicity, which, eh,
very academic.
I, I don't think that was the best title. But I submitted it to contests.
Uh-huh.
I submitted it to slush piles. Nobody was biting. I mean, I was a finalist for the National Poetry Series, so that's not, that's
Nothing.
nothing
Yeah.
to be nonchalant about. But it wasn't, I didn't win.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to a friend of mine and I was crying on the phone, like snot bubble in my nose, punching the air,
No.
sliding down the wall, kind of crying. I
Yeah.
can't get this published. I was deeply upset. I was like, no one likes my work. I'm not a real poet. And this man, Nate Marshall,
Mhm.
dope poet out of Chicago, he said to me, but you have a publisher. You have Duke. And I was like, Duke doesn't do poetry. He's like, yes, they do. I contacted my editor for Black Madness, Mad Blackness, which is one of the scholarly monographs. And Ken Wissaker was like, "Yeah, let's meet on Friday." I told him about the project. He said, "Let me take a look," and that was it.
Yep.
So it was very click your heels three times because you had the power within you, kind of process.
Right. It's and it's funny because for all of the things that you have to do along the line, right? You properly
Mhm.
do things, you go through the correct things, you send it in. I want to say 75% of this is just happenstance of
Yes.
a person saying, "Oh, you did all those things? Yeah, bring it to me," because it's actually been vetted that much. And so
Mhm.
it gets to the right person. You only need one as a yes.
Yeah. Prestige builds prestige. Connections build connections. It's a truism of how the world works, fairly or unfairly.
Exactly, exactly. Okay. Next question. Your use of the poetic form in this collection is extraordinary. Therí Alyce. I've been trying to pronounce that. Oh,
Villanelles.
the nails. I was close. I was close. I literally went over this like 10 times. I was trying to go.
That's what it is, blacknically.
Yeah. What is
Technically, it's the villanelle.
villanelle mean? What does villanelle mean?
It's a poetic form. Oh, are you asking me what it means
Yeah,
in its original language?
just in the original language, yeah.
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh,
But it's
no, no, just no, you just tell me what it means colloquially,
Oh,
friend.
sure. So it's a poetic form that Bob Haas describes as obsessive. So I think most people know villanelles because if they know poetry, and they know like major white poets, they'll know One Art by Elizabeth Bishop.
Okay.
And so it repeats two lines over and over again so that you are charting the progress of a thought down the page.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. And a crown of sonnets. Haibu? Haibun?
Typhoon. Yeah.
See, and a form called. See, I'll tell you, I went to Berkeley, but look, I'm like, so I kept going. So we get the questions from different sources, and I'm like, who the hell was a smart person in this? Palimpsestini?
Palimpsestina.
Thank you. See, this is why you wear the cool Italian hat with the PhD. That you had to explain your own notes. What does reaching for a difficult form let you do that free verse cannot?
Yeah, I like structure.
Mhm.
I like structure in my day. I like structure in my week. And so I think once I have a kind of skeletal form, which is
Mhm.
what most of these are, I can figure out what the rules are that I want to keep and what the rules are that I want to break.
Mhm.
So my villanelle comes after Elizabeth Bishop's One Art and Jean Murillo's ooh, now I can't remember what the name of his poem is, but he has a
That's
poem. And but that man's got poems. And it's in conversation with those. So I think the
Mhm.
form helped me be in conversation as well as the subject matter.
Okay.
I think for the Crown of Sonnets, I mean that Crown of Sonnets, that's the titular poem of the collection, I needed a long form to tell that story. And
Right.
so free verse would, to my mind, not give you anything to hold on to.
Yeah.
I have difficulty reading long poems that don't have some structure in them
Yeah.
because I don't have a purchase. It's like, climbing the smooth side of a mountain, right? Like
Right.
you have to have purchase.
Yeah.
And the palimpsestina, I made it up. I thought I made it up independently, but Josh Bennett also had a palimpsestina in his work as well. So
Yeah, it's one of the things about people don't really recognize, in terms of story structure in particular, whatever form, it's almost, non-writers oftentimes kind of flatten writing as being just, it's every form is the same, right?
yeah,
And so, there's my frat brother, the late great Eric Drum Dickey, once said that, folks believe that they can write because they got an A on their book report in the fifth grade. And
100%.
so, so, and one of the things that people fail to realize is that every writing discipline has a form,
Hmm.
and like you said, it's a little bit like free association as a book, right?
Yeah,
And so, the beat poets would like, to use, free expression, free association, in the 1950s, and it can work in terms of a period of like, if you want to capture a period of time, but in
yeah,
longer forms it becomes just a run-on sentence, and it
yes,
just you're like, your brain from birth is recognizes patterns, and if they don't see the patterns, like you say, that's a great analogy. It's like the smooth side of a mountain. You just don't have anything to grip onto,
yeah,
and it can be daring, but it's in the same way of like, let's say, David Foster Wallace creating these giant
yeah.
tomes with footnotes and things like that. Maybe it works, but for me, it's not going to work because I don't
Right.
need a fiction, a novel with, with all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure for poetry, it's the exact same thing.
It is, and I think you write maybe that first draft for yourself. The first draft is selfish. It's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you've been touched by a muse.
Yeah.
But when you start editing, you really have to respect your reader. If
Yes.
you want people to engage and you want folks to understand, you have to give them signposting. You have to do scene work. You have to do world building. You have to be clear about in what context your metaphor works.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be mindful of the fact that writing is communication.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's what form lets me do. I mean, I've been experimenting with free verse lately, so maybe I'll have a different answer for you, in 2 years. Uh,
But
but
we can create a complicated word named the Pickens, stuff. I'll create some stuff around it. We'll be right at the right shade. We were the first to hear the new form. So y'all go ahead and do your new form. I'll be happy to go up there. Yeah, I know a poet. She didn't do the E. E. Cummings way. She didn't do it.
not E. Comics catching strays.
Hey, no, E. Cummings was one of my favorite poets in elementary school. That was one of the things that made me want to be a writer. So I can't remember a single E. Cummings poem right now, but no, I was a E. Cummings fan, mainly because he would have the audaciousness of using lowercase,
Yeah.
his name in lowercase, which I was like, oh, that speaks to me. So all
Me
right,
too.
let me get to the next question. Your scholarly book, Black Madness, which, by the way, all of her books will be in the links. Buy them. Like I said, we don't do the whole just, oh, she's great. Buy them. Excuse me. Black Madness, Mad Blackness from 2019 fundamentally changed and shaped the field of Black disability studies. How does thinking about disability and living with chronic disability yourself change what a poem is allowed to do on the page?
Ooh, okay. So, Black Madness was born out of this idea that we were not complicated enough about the relationship between Blackness and disability broadly,
Mm-hmm.
and then Blackness and mental health and mental illness very specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in that book, I'm trying to create some theory around it. And for people who are a little unnerved by theory, I think it's useful to say this. The analyst, the literary analyst, which is, I think, the scholar that people are most used to, that person's playground is the literature.
Mm-hmm.
The theorist, that person's playground is the analysis. And
Right.
so we're just a hair removed. And that's not always true, but for that book, it is true. So as I'm trying to develop a theory of how Blackness and mental health and biopsychiatric and cognitive disabilities function, I'm trying to think about how they change the story,
Mm-hmm.
how these differences make a difference.
Right.
That in the same way that Black folks are not, darker white people, I believe I believe George Schuyler said that we are lamp-blacked Anglo-Saxons. And George Schuyler as a satirist.
Oh yeah, George
Is
Scott. That was a very interesting dude.
Yes.
He was, and for those of you, I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know George Schuyler, he was how do you? I mean, in fact, everything about him and his family was kind of very odd, interesting, and different.
Yeah.
He was, I don't know if you could say a black conservative,
I would
but
call him a Black conservative, and I'd say he was fairly principled, I think, to the
yeah,
point of absurdity about
yes,
his
to the
Black experience.
John Birch Society level
Yeah.
of being a black conservative, that
To
level.
endangering the health and welfare of his child.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Didn't she die? Commit? Have a?
Yeah.
Did she? Yeah.
I believe she
Let's
did.
say. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Even
So
his picture gives off that.
it's
I'll put
it's
a picture up.
a vibe. It's a vibe. Um, so yeah, he's satirically responding to the Negro artist in the Racial Mountain when he says that Black folks are lamp-blacked Anglo-Saxons. And
Mhm.
he's wrong,
Right.
because there are differences that make a difference. But my question, I think, for the poetry and then also for the scholarship was, how did those differences that make a difference change the narrative?
Right.
So I think a more accessible example that I can use is one of my favorite authors. She's a Black British romance writer. Her name is Talia Hibbert, and in all of her romances, there's someone with a disability.
Right.
Now, when you have two autistic people falling in love, they will not be gazing lovingly into each other's eyes. That's not going to
Right.
happen.
Right.
Touch is going to be quite fraught,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the kind of autism that they have or depending on where they are on the spectrum. And they also, when they have these sort of realizations as characters, they'll want to act immediately. It won't matter to them that it's 4 a.m. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
a sense of temporal displacement that happens in her novels. There's a sense of just changing the rules of how people fall in love, but
Oh.
all of those things are based on how disability functions, as well as how race functions, and
Mm-hmm.
race in the UK in particular.
Right.
So that's the example of like how I'm thinking about it. I think in the poetry, um, I put disability at the center.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we understand the Voting Rights Act if we understand it as the um, odd compassion of a man who just experienced a heart attack, right?
Right. Right.
If
Right.
yeah, if Lyndon B. Johnson hadn't had his heart attack, right? I think that's one of the titles of the poems. And
Right.
then what do you do when you put disability at the center of eroticism? I think the last poem is certainly in that vein. Um,
And
so
see, I get excited. See, that for me as a writer, you
yeah.
just I'm like, oh my God, the possibilities are endless, right?
They
Because
are.
the one thing you think about as a writer when you particularly when you're writing fiction is like, God, I don't want to trope. I don't want to, characters, and you can do a bunch of different characteristic things to try to make sure. But if you open up a door where where things don't happen how you expect, based
Yeah,
upon characters that you never see, the world is your oyster.
absolutely.
Oh my
Absolutely.
goodness.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question. You are the Charles A. Dana Professor of English and Africana at Bates College, which is in Lewiston, Maine, a very
Hmm.
specific type of place for a Black woman, scholar, poet to be building a life. What does Maine give you that you couldn't find somewhere else?
Oh, um, I think like a lot of Black kids who grew up in these sort of middle class aspirational or middle class households, I was given a barrage of figures that were Black firsts. This person was the first Black person to do this. This was the first Black person to do that. Um, and I always thought I wanted to be a first
Right.
until I actually was the first Black woman to be a Charles A. Dana Professor of English and Africana. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think what Maine has given me, because it is one of the whitest states in the Union, is a sense of what it is like to be at the maelstrom of whiteness, white working classness, Black immigrant communities to which I do not belong,
Right.
and sitting inside a history that does not resonate with me. I'm not a New Englander. I think the Mid Atlantic and the New England are separate spaces.
Right.
And I also think I deserve to be Black where I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So being in largely white environments, I went to Princeton, I went to UCLA, now I'm in Maine, it radicalizes you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what Maine has given me is a clarity about what it is to strive for equity, what it is to be attuned to whether or not justice is present and whether it's working,
Right.
to be very clear about who my audience is. As a writer, I wouldn't consider myself a Maine writer. I'm writing in Maine, but I'm not a Maine writer
Right.
because that's not my audience and that's not my influences.
Beautiful.
So I think, those are some of the things that Maine has given me sort of in a Zora Neale Hurston style.
That's
Um, I,
logical.
yeah, feel most colored me with thrown up against a white background.
Right.
But in terms of the other things that you can find here, there's quiet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time to move at the speed of your own thoughts as a writer, which is really crucial.
Right.
Um, there's a deep honesty that people have about themselves and about where they are in the world. So just eavesdropping, I think as a writer, I'm always ear hustling to
Yeah.
hear
Me too.
what's going on in this dialogue.
Uh,
What are people saying? What are their thoughts? And you get to hear a wide variety of opinions and ideas.
yeah.
Um, there's also, I think, to Maine's credit, and I don't take advantage of this, a outdoors interest, right? You have skiing in the winter, you've got
Mhm.
hiking, and there's natural beauty all around. Um, I think if I were more of a nature girl, I would be outside. But
Right.
since I'm not, I watch it from the comfort of my air-conditioned home, and I'm very grateful that it is there, and I try to protect it by not doing anything egregious with my money or my resources. So, you know, that's where I'm at.
See, even when you ain't even doing it, you still do it. You
Right.
still
I
work.
recycle.
It takes, look, take some pictures, y'all. Good. I'll be here when y'all get back.
Right, right.
Oh my
I'll make sure
goodness.
you have ice water. You go
That's
on
it.
ahead.
I'm a giver.
Right.
All right. All right. The next question. The title, What Had Happened Was, which
Yeah.
of course is the most Black title on the face of the earth, is a phrase that carries a very specific cultural weight. It's the way Black folks set up a story that is going somewhere complicated, which is so true. Why that phrase and what story does it set up for the whole collection?
Um, hmm. There's two different stories. I'm trying to figure out which one to tell you. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
so boom. I was trying to figure out how to rename it from customary calculus of blah blah blah. And I was
Every
like,
time I'm gonna have that in some story that I do. That's like the most complicated title I've seen in my 30 years. But hey,
it's wild that I thought that was a great title for a collection. It's I was I don't know
I
if I
bet
was
you were dogmatic too. You were like, just I'm gonna plant my flag here, and everybody else is hella gentle. But maybe,
right. I mean, and the poem, the titular poem for that collection is actually in the collection.
right,
But it doesn't work as the title of a collection. So I had to figure out what's something that captures what I'm doing.
right,
And I kept asking myself, what is the heart of this? What is
Mhm.
the major idea? And I was like, it's Black storytelling. How do Black stories start? Well, what had happened was, and that's also why the collection is divided the way it is
Mhm.
in three sections called This, That, and the Third, and then an interlude called Mind You, because that's how we that's how we structure.
That is so brilliant. That is so very good. It creates a visceral. You already know what's happening after that.
Yes,
Oh
yes.
my god!
And I
Like,
point out that people have difficulty pronouncing the collection.
really?
So folks will change, they will change it to what happened was, or
Oh,
they will stumble over the D and had, because we never
wow!
pronounced the D and had. What
Right.
had happened was,
What happened? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And actually, you don't even have to get all the way through.
yeah,
What happened?
yeah, what had happened.
It,
Yeah.
it is, but it also is a. It's also, I guess, my boy Bomani Jones always like to talk about two Americas.
Hmm.
And there's even going back to your what we were talking about earlier about the quote unquote, black white people. Oftentimes it seems like white people believe that we're black white people, and there's
Yeah.
really no cultural difference. And if any cultural differences, they've seen it on TV, so they're up on it, right? And that this is an intimate phrase. This is an
Right.
intimate intercultural phrase,
Yes.
interracial phrase. So is the collection itself kind of like part of that personal cultural interracial does that theme kind of continue on with the poems?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there are certain references that I think you would need to understand in order to really connect with the poems. And
Hmm.
this is something that I think about as someone who teaches.
Hmm.
So I was visiting a class this past semester,
Hmm.
um, and they were reading Aaliyah Bilal's Temple Folk.
Okay.
And one of the stories is set up where you've got these specific references to Black cultural figures, and they weren't talking about those. So I interjected to ask, hey, so, how are you making sense of these references? And one student told me, I don't need to know them because the collection is written for everybody. Um, and I had to keep quiet because it wasn't my class. But I think if it were my class, I would have said something very similar to, we do not have the same expectation for non-Black writers. We expect that we will know something about Homer's time. We expect that we will know
Mhm.
something about Salman Rushdie. We expect that we will know something about Junot Diaz, and we expect that we
Mhm.
will know something about Mary Higgins Clark,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So this idea that the cultural references are simply open and that they are coincidental or incidental to or tangential to the understanding of the work is an anti-Black reading strategy. And
Yeah.
so I deliberately have a collection that is specifically and deliberately Black
Right.
so that people know that Black folks are my audience. If you are
Mhm.
eavesdropping and interloping, be aware that that's what you're doing
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
respect it enough to look that stuff up or to ask or to seek to understand because there's some stuff that's ours.
And thinking about, say, for example, just the collection before it gets published,
Yeah.
and you have your editor, and editors pretty much, and I always give editors grace. They take on a wide variety of different POVs, and they have you cannot simply be an editor who knows everything about everything.
Right.
But did they at any point in time go, I don't understand this part, or I didn't, what does this mean, or did they just go, hey, you're the expert, let's go with it?
I think Ken's attitude was the reviewers don't have a problem with anything you've done except the order in which you presented it, change the order, take that one poem out that they didn't like, and we're good to go.
Hey,
Um,
that's what you want to hear.
yeah, I think my editor respected me enough to be like, between the reader's reports and what I know you to be, I'm behind this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And it also kind of works to the because most editors love different voices,
hmm,
so that also works in your favor. Unique voices will always work over kind of like the ninth version of something that they've seen a billion times. So it makes them feel special. It makes them go, "Oh, look at I discovered her." That type of stuff. Even though you've been doing it for years and everything like that.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Oh my God, I forgot about this. The See, this is like my own personal nightmare. The polypistina. Say what this thing is.
Palimpsestina.
Polypistina. See, that's why you're a delta and I'm an alpha.
I don't know if we can hang our hat on that.
You with that extra mile. Is a form built on layering and overwriting one text showing through another. That feels deeply connected to how Black history actually works in America. Definitely. What was the connection? Was the connection intentionally from the start, or did the form find the content?
So this poem came about while I was in mid conversation with two people who had to take care of their parents while their parents were experiencing dementia.
Oh,
And as they were talking, because I had nothing to contribute to the conversation, the poem started to just form itself in my mind.
right.
And that's very rare. I think people love to romanticize the process by which poems are written,
Yeah.
but in actuality, it's you getting up to constantly write, seeing what works and what doesn't. But this one sort of came to me, and the way that it came, it was two voices, and how those two voices were making sense of the same subject matter just from two very different perspectives. And there's a refrain. Of course, I know it's 1964. They just shot the president. You
Right.
can't go back in time because you don't like the president. So
Right.
the poem was
Right.
written in 2017.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
And, I'm trying to figure out what this new America looks like. And so that refrain is probably the most me of the
hmm
poem.
hmm
But that question, what do you know what year it is the question that people ask to see if you're lucid.
Okay, guys, I know I hate it too, but I have to do this one last thing before you leave. There's a free newsletter. Sign up for it because you're going to get advance notice of their videos a week prior. And we want to make sure that you do that just in case, I don't know, the YouTube algorithm gets wonky from time to time, but you'll always know who's coming up. Also, we're going to try to do something. I don't know if we're going to call it a bestseller list, but something to gather up the titles the authors that you all are reading. Uh, Books, titles, give me the obscure things so I can actually see. And then finally, for you authors out there, you Black authors out there who want to be able to let people know about your book, we're going to have a blurb section where you can put a blurb and then a copy of your book cover for just $9.99 for that week. So that all helps us to actually pay the bills and also helps make sure that we can actually bring you more authors. Okay, that's it. Back to the interview.
Well,
Right.
what president, who is currently president, is the question that they ask in emergency rooms and for neurological testing.
Mm-hmm.
So that connection between the two speakers, the adult child and the parent experiencing dementia, that's how those voices came, and the idea that they were overriding each other,
Yeah.
both in terms of Black history and Black culture, um, and in terms of their relationship, that sort of precipitated the word, which I thought I had coined. Right, I thought I
Right.
was so clever, and then I was like, ugh.
That's like leaving the Divine Nine. I thought I had coined it. And then I was like, oh, no.
No, you didn't. You did not think that.
No,
You did
I
not
did. Because I
thought about.
started it in 97. It was like the first year that Iota came. I was like, oh, look at me. And then it was like, oh, now everybody was talking about it. My bad. Hey, you learned. But by the way, just aside for what you were talking about in terms of like using the year and things like this,
Mhm.
this is a funny story because nothing was fine. But my wife had fainted one time, and I'm just like panicked, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And then she just kind of woke up and was like, "Today is da 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 da," and I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" She was like, "Oh, that's what you're supposed to say when
Yeah.
you actually think." I was like, I had no idea. I just thought she was crazy or had come up to awaken from a new dimension that I didn't understand.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
So
supposed to ask what year is it and who is president and what do you see around you? Where are you?
That is
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, until I personally had that experience, had no clue. All right. The collection engages pop culture. The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, Lil Kim, Mary J. Blige, along with history and theory. And we touched a little bit about theory. What
Hmm.
happens in the space between a Lil Kim and a lyric and a Harriet Tubman poem that neither could produce alone?
Well, at first, I mean, there's this, when you collapse them, you get the possibility of Harriet Tubman having an attitude.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like if if, if Little Kim is irreverent, right? And Harriet Tubman is revered, then the space between is that space where those two connect.
Right.
So, when we look at Cynthia Erivo playing Harriet Tubman, and there are certain moments where she gives a look or an indicator that she's not simply a prophet on a quest to free Black people, but that she's
Hmm.
a that Harriet Tubman was a real human woman with emotions,
Right.
right? Um, then you then you take away some of the piety with which we approach Harriet Tubman, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
I don't
But
either.
you also add some
Hmm.
piety to Little Kim,
Yeah,
um,
I guess so.
and
Yeah.
which I think is, she deserves so much respect for everything that she pioneered and everything that she was a part of, and how much she's a part of a lineage,
Hmm.
um, and what that means for those of us who grew up listening to her or who found parts of ourselves through listening to her.
Hmm.
Um, and I think when they touch, you get a fuller range of Black womanhood specifically, but
Hmm.
also Blackness more broadly. I think with Mary J. Blige, there's also Big Mama Thornton makes an appearance, Ursa Corregidora, who's a character, makes an appearance. I think of them as blues women.
Right.
Um,
All of them.
yeah, I think of
Yeah.
all of them as blues women, in part because there's pain there, but there's joy there.
Right.
There's sorrow, and there's complicated grief, um, as well as improvisation. And so I think for all of those factors, along with the blues being something that repeats with a difference,
Right.
Harriet Tubman is not talking about exactly the same things as Little Kim, but they are both trying to make their way in the world
Right.
and make their way in the world around freedom. Now, for
Yes.
both of them, it looks different, but I think there's enough of a similarity there to put them in conversation.
And when you say that, when we talk about like those women in particular, that oftentimes that they are defined, they don't have the agency to self-define themselves.
Right.
Oftentimes, what happens is that others define them and then put them in whatever categories that kind of creates the box. So, Lil Kim, sex, without listening to any of her hip hop lyrics, in terms of she's in the box. She may be a great hip hop artist, but she's in the box, and she can't have any other expression other than in the box. Harriet Tubman, yes, she was a brilliant military strategist, brilliant military spy, brilliant person to be able to, but she cannot have human emotions. We need to make her into kind of like what they would say the ivory tower, in terms of the person on the pedestal. So therefore, we avoid those things that actually give her agency. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that. I also think that because those boxes are largely constructed by narratives that serve people other than them,
Right. Yeah.
that those boxes are harder to get out of because people have really emotional responses to those boxes.
Right. 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 Beautiful. Next question. You appeared on Maine Public Radio as part of a panel on new directions in poetry. What direction do you think American poetry actually needs to go that is still too afraid to take?
Oh, hmm.
Other than words that I can't pronounce, we produce great poetry.
um, um,
And you can divide it up between generalized American poetry or in terms of African American poetry, because they're not necessarily the same,
no, they're not at all.
lanes.
Yeah. Well, when I was so Furious Flower is this conference that happens every 10 years, sort of a gathering space for Black poets.
Hmm.
And I was there in 2024.
Right.
And one of the things that was so clear was that there was an emphasis on a diasporic understanding of Black poetry. um, but that not all of us were talking to each other in our poems. And
What do you mean by
so
that? What do you mean by that?
yeah, so there were some Caribbean based or British based poets that I was surprised to hear
Hmm.
and surprised to connect with. And it's not because I think that in terms of the diaspora, the experiences are so different,
Right.
but because my understanding of a Black American poet was that we had a specific lane we were in.
Hmm. Right.
But the diaspora expands my understanding of how much we are all in the same lane, and if not in the
Right.
same, on the same highway. Um,
Right.
but that if you're thinking about someone like Canicia Lubrin, who's a I think Caribbean Canadian poet, if I have that
Mhm.
correct,
Yeah, I think
or
so. Yeah.
Malika Booker,
I'm sorry. The
Malika
last
Booker,
person. Who was the
Malika
last person you
Booker,
said? Okay. Yes.
yeah, who's Black British. Their poetry is vastly different, but they're still connecting to the heart of a very specific Black experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I was surprised that I as a poet was not thinking about them as part of my audience. And it was
Yeah.
also very clear that while they were getting to the kernel of their experience, that also meant that there were some Black folks who understood their experience as foreign.
Yeah,
And so,
it's funny, but like 20 years ago, I went to London, and one of the places that I went to was a poet, poetry reading, spoken word combination. I remember it was Ainsley Burroughs was there,
ooh, yeah.
yeah, from here, and it was I really kind of solidified the idea of cousin. I was very fascinated. In fact, my next novel is going to be Black British situation. But it's one of those things where I was very curious. It was like meeting cousins from somewhere just close, but they're just a little off. It's just like being from California and I see my Texas cousins, right? You're
Yeah.
like, we're the same, but you do have experiences that are very unique to living off I-35 versus the experience that I have off PCH, right? And so do you see that there are, because of course you've watched the diaspora wars on social media and
Hmm.
things like that.
Absolutely.
Do you think poetry is a kind of a conduit for us understanding each other and what those differences are, but the differences not being deal breakers?
Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking about something like the BAFTA incident, where
Yes.
Black British folks, particularly there's one Black British woman who's a comedian living in America who was like,
I saw that.
oh, the white British folks are going to have an inkling of what it is to F around and find out because Black Americans do not tolerate the same amount of disrespect that Black British folks have become accustomed to tolerating.
Hmm.
And there was something really profound in that realization that
Hmm.
for the sake of safety, Black British folks are maligned significantly and consistently, and also are navigating that in their spaces, while Black Americans with a kind of history of outspokenness that is not necessarily circumscribed by immigration status,
Right.
um, have the opportunity to call out the BBC,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think poetry and comedy, because I think those two go hand in hand, have a way of loosening the spirit so that you can actually form connections. And so that's what I found at Fury's Flower, and I think that's one direction that we might want to go in. Um, I think for American poetry, I have a friend who was the Utah State Poet Laureate. She describes it as being a mascot that they kind of trot her out when they need poetry and then put her back in.
Come on
Um,
out of here, say some of them lines.
and I think America's afraid to embrace the power of poetry
Yeah, I think
because
so too.
what happens if you've got a poem about a flower unfurling?
Hmm.
And some gay kid in a pretty hostile and homophobic environment reads that
Yeah.
and then determines that they are that flower. And
Right.
then there's another person that reads that in the crucible of racism and sexism, and she decides, or they
Hmm.
decide that they are that flower. Those two people are going to connect.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, what America cannot stand is
Mhm.
the unification of Black folks and other folks of color
Right.
on the one hand, and then also Black folks and working class white folks. And
Bingo.
poetry is one of the spaces where we can actually do that. But
Hmm.
I don't think America is ready for what that looks like.
Right.
Because it's, it's fundamentally anti-establishment.
Right. I remember listening and giving credit to the Rest is History podcast. They did a thing on World War I, and they talked about poets enduring in the soldiers who were poets, and a lot of great poetry came out of World War I, and it usually typically wars. But they were saying is about how powerful those poems were, not the jingoistic type of poems, but the poems that really revealed the humanity within the inhumanity. And I
Right.
think that's why I think poets and librarians are some of the most dangerous people in the world, because you all observe the world and then put it into a form that makes you viscerally realize something to you, in terms of how you interpret it. But like you accurately said, it can be multitudes of people reading the same a poem, and getting a different feeling. And you connect those people. Yes, you bonded by it. That's excellent. That's absolutely excellent. Okay, next question. The book puts Harriet Tubman, Mary J. Blige, Lil Kim, and Breonna Taylor in conversation across the same pages. What do those women have to say to each other that the rest of the culture refuses to let them say?
I make choices. I make choices. So
Uh-huh.
the Harriet Tubman poem is about that recompense that she asked for Congress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's another companion Harriet Tubman poem where this little girl is trying to figure out what she owes another little Black girl.
Right.
Um, because if Harriet Tubman is a kind of great unifier, then what happens if you believe that the person you're in conflict with had ancestors that snitched on Harriet Tubman? That this person is could not possibly be an ally.
No.
Um, so I think both of those poems are about choices, right? To make the choice to have agency. The Mary J. Blige poem is also about choice, the choice to be child free.
Right.
Um, Kim is part of the epigraph of the collection, part of the collection of epigraphs, and so as a result, I think for me it's about a choice to emerge as a poet. Um, and with Breonna Taylor, the thing that I wanted to capture was that she made choices about how she was going to build a life.
Right.
She said in her posts prior to her murder, um, that 2020 was going to be the year of Breonna Taylor,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that she wanted more for herself in terms of her career. She was with her boyfriend at the time. They spent the day on an extended date.
Yeah.
There's something in there about choosing Black love.
Right.
Um, and I think all of them had agency, made choices. And the reason why that Breonna Taylor poem is focused on her life and not her murder is because I want people to know she was loved.
Yeah. 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 That's beautiful. Okay. Use hyphens, strategic white space, which I just love. That is just, I was like, play with that page. Play with that page, yeah. And unconditional sentence structure. Oh, that's you just I just wrapping my arms around your writing. Uh, structures throughout the book to make the reader slow down and feel the weight of the moment. When you're working on a poem, how do you know when the space on the page is doing work versus when it's just empty?
Yeah. This is something I started to think about actually after the collection. Um, so, my first training as a poet as an adult, as opposed to as a student, um, which is not to say the students aren't adults, but I felt very much like a child in my first workshops. Anyway, so I went to Community of Writers,
Right.
and Bob Haas has this interest in thinking about poetry as controlling the breath, that it's a very intimate act. And so that was kind of the training with which I came to the page, thinking about blank space, thinking about sentence structures, hyphens. One of my friends from college, who is also a poet, his name is Sharif Shanahan. He loves an M dash. He loves looking at.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, they're so evocative, and so watching him discuss the utility of the M dash also gave me some ideas. So I
Mhm,
think that's how that shows up in that work. Since
mhm.
then, I was in a workshop with Paisley Rectal, and Paisley, the first thing she said to us was, "You might have to let go of everything, including your fidelity to the left-hand side of the page." And
Oh,
I was like, you know what?
I'm sticking
You
to the left.
said you. Like, and
Although I love me some centered, I will never write a book with everything centered. Maybe I
right.
will, but I love me some centered. I don't know what it is about the centering stuff.
Yeah.
Makes me feel kind of like good. Now I go back and put everything back on the left, but still, I'm like,
I mean,
why can't I do this whole thing this way?
there's something about it expanding from the center of the page or sort of unfurling in that
Mhm.
way.
Well, I think of poems like that though. I
Yeah.
think of poems as being a center type of structure versus kind of like the fiction or nonfiction in terms of how you set it up. I kind of in my brain think of it as being centered into the page in a column. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. I mean, and once she said that in the workshop, I was like, my life has changed. I don't I don't know if I will continue to always, stick to the left-hand side of the page.
Mhm.
Um, so much of what was done in the first collection is experimental in that regard. Is, oh, let me see how this works. Oh, I think it works. Let me keep it there. But
Yeah.
I think for the second collection, I got bolder. And I think you can tell when the space and the hyphens are doing work when you can see the resonance away
Mhm.
from the space where it is.
Yeah.
So if the hyphen is doing work where it exists on the page, the work that that hyphen is doing, you should be able to see it, or it should be cultivated in other parts of the poem where the hyphen is not, so that the
Right.
meaning can traverse the
Yes.
poem.
Right.
Um, so that's how you know it's doing work. And if it's an empty gesture,
You
you
could
won't
easily.
be able to, yeah, you won't be able to press on it. Like there's
Right.
there's very little pressure you can apply to those things.
Yeah, it very much. If you can kind of tell when something becomes gimmicky or there's no there. You're
Yeah.
just doing it as a styling kind of exercise versus you want to be able to translate. It's like when whenever you decide you want to have a full run-on sentence that actually because you're trying to evoke the stream of thought that is coming from and then you slow it down, ellipses, hyphens,
Hmm.
and then you continue on. You know what you're trying to evoke. But if you're
Right.
just doing that, then it just becomes annoying. And then people go, this does I'm not getting a payoff for whatever that particular choice is. And the reader will punch you.
Yeah.
They run up and that's the reason why the whole combination of trust the reader, but also be bold at the same time.
Hmm.
Next question, because you just can't do one thing. you, you work across Arab American studies, Black studies, comparative literature, and disability studies. Like that's before noon. What does it feel like to live in between all those fields, and do any of those actually talk to each other? And what do you do with the translation work? Yourself. Like the
Yeah.
things that the combination of them. And go ahead.
Yeah. So I think they all speak to each other. I think
Hmm.
disability is pervasive across all the other three. And I think
Hmm.
comparative literature is simply the discipline through which I engage everything. So we
Hmm.
have a couple of adages in the field. One of them is you can compare apples and oranges if the basis of comparison is fruit. You can
Right.
compare people and papaya if the basis of comparison is the letter P.
Okay.
So the the nature of what Complet does is
Uh,
that it asks you, what do you get from these two things together that you can't get from them alone? So the
right.
the comparative question you asked me about Lil Kim and Harriet Tubman
Yeah.
is a quintessential comparative literature question.
Hmm.
To my mind, Arab American studies and Black studies are in conversation in multiple ways. and they're in conversation both in terms of history and in terms of the present. And I think we saw that most recently in the 2024 election,
Right.
where you had Arab American folks who, you know, rightly or wrongly, people think the distillate of their political concerns is Palestine,
Right.
um, but it is a lightning rod, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is also a space where Black folks, because they were finally understanding something en masse
Right.
about, you know, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, about Islam, about Palestine, about Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
and about the complicity of the US government in genocide,
Right.
because those two communities were politically aligned, you
Right.
also had the potential for political disruption and what felt like to many people political disrespect.
Right.
So the folks who set out the election, or who said I'm going to vote third party, um, it's a long history of, you know, a vote that is a protest vote.
Right.
But Black folks and Black women in particular are pragmatic.
Very much so.
And so their sense of whatever it is you don't want to happen internationally,
Right.
you also do not want the chaos of things, of certain things happening domestically, because that will also create a further international disruption. And
Right.
so when Black studies and Arab American studies takes a look at this situation, you have
Mm-hmm.
to take a look at things like anti-Blackness. You have to take a look at the connections that the communities have because of Islam. You have to
Right.
take a look at how piety and conservatism, um, even when, you know, on the more radical side of conservatism, of being conservative surfaces, that those communities are still living in the teeth of empire, and
Right.
their ways of strategizing can be sometimes at cross purposes and then sometimes very greatly aligned.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think they
Beautiful.
all go together.
Yeah. I kind of figured. You know, if anybody in the world who can put them all together, I think you would put them together. You know, I'm not calling me shocked. You know, that y'all go together. All right, the next one. You gave the Clement A. Price Humanities Scholar in Residence lecture at Rutgers after the book came out. What is the question an audience member asked you during the visit that you still think about, if you can remember?
Yeah. So the Scholar in Residence program is with honor students at Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was undergrads who were on the verge of graduating, and some who were going to be seniors. And one of the questions that I was repeatedly asked was how do you survive graduate school? How do you do graduate school? And this is a particularly difficult question to answer for me, in
Mm-hmm.
part because my experience in graduate school was golden.
Right.
I had
Because you met me.
community. Yes, well, of course. Of course. For everyone out there in, you know, Legoland, I just want to tell you that this was the highlight of my
Oh,
graduate school experience. No, I, I, in all honesty, it was, you were part of a community of Black folks that took me seriously as a scholar and as a thinker. So I think, like, yes, it's like it's in earnest, yes, absolutely. But I had community. I had advisors that I trusted and they trusted me, although there was one bad apple. And I had I had a campus that was as accessible as I needed it to be.
right.
And so surviving graduate school was not as difficult for me as it was for some of my peers.
Right. Right.
Um, and so when I think about that question, I think about how the circumstances of my life made graduate school easier for me than it had been for other people.
Wow.
And that doing graduate school during the Obama years is vastly different than doing graduate school in a Trump era.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Very,
So
very much so. I feel bad because it dawned on me that some of these students, particularly now hitting college, or have had 10 years of Trumpism, basically.
hmm
And
hmm
it's insane. They don't understand what a normal is. That's what's kind of scary.
yeah,
That's gonna have ramifications for generations long after I'm gone. They're gonna have ramifications.
yeah.
Okay, next question. You wrote the poem on March 12th, 2020, Breonna Taylor, the night before she was killed, referring to that. What
hmm
does it mean to write towards someone who doesn't know yet what is about to happen to her?
Yeah, that piece, during 2020, I had a lot of time to listen to the news. Just a
Yeah,
lot of, and I was trying to avoid listening to it for more than, 20, 30 minutes a day because
right.
it was overwhelming. Um, you know, so, and also I feel like I have to say I couldn't turn it off because I
Yeah.
could not know what was happening.
Hmm.
It just felt unsafe for me to be ignorant. Um, but the New York Times had a podcast called The Daily, uh, and Michael Barbaro was the host. He did a two-part series called The Killing of Breonna Taylor,
Oh, mhm.
and I respected the fact that he called it a killing and
Yeah.
not the death or something more, supposedly neutral or in passive voice in a way that was disrespectful to her memory.
Right.
But he describes the first part. He describes the day that she and Kenny had
Right.
before all of this happened, and that part really struck me.
Yeah.
Um, so on the one hand, as someone with a chronic illness who is also immune compromised, I couldn't go outside.
Right.
But an online world opened up, and that included, online dating, which since we were in lockdown during the last 2 weeks of the first quarter of
Right.
2020.
Hmm.
Dating sites will tell you that the best time to be on there is in the first quarter and maybe the first month of the second quarter of the year, in
Right.
part because everyone has made their New Year's resolutions and they're really looking for love, etc.
Hmm.
But with 2020, everybody was online trying to date
Right.
to come out of COVID cuffing. And so,
Extended cuffing season.
yes, extended cuffing too. And so I was trying to get on that train. There were a whole bunch of poetry readings that opened up, and one of the things that struck me was that she was attempting to live a life that didn't know anything about what we were experiencing.
Right.
And to
Oh,
try
that's
to
a
write to that was to just stay in that moment, just stay
right.
in that day.
Yeah.
Um, and try not to end the poem on death. Like the poem
Yeah.
ends, the final word of the poem is love.
Right.
Um, and there's foreboding, but there's also this cocoon. And I don't want to, I don't know her man. I don't want to
Right.
romanticize what they,
Right. Right. Right.
but, it just seemed like a lovely day between two people who really cared about each other, and I wanted it to stay that way. I'm
Right.
also, I'm a big romance reader, which
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
started in 2020. And so there's something about Black women being loved down
Yeah.
that I also really gravitated toward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You've been. That's okay. I'm a rom com guy. My wife don't care nothing about rom com. I'm the first one to be like, "You silly fool." Anyway, so all right, let's get to the next question. We might have to speed them up.
Sure.
You've been in a formal poetry program at Breadloaf, Vona, Kenyon, Hurston Wright, and the community of writers, which we talked about a little bit earlier.
hmm
What is the thing that you learned at one of these workshops that immediately changed how you wrote?
Yeah. So the Paisley Rectile thing was at Vona, and so that definitely immediately changed how I wrote. Community of writers taught me how to give feedback.
Oh, yeah.
So authors, we can be a little mean to each other, unkind with not a little. We can be quite mean to each other, unkind in
Very much.
feedback.
Mm-hmm.
But the rule at Community of Writers is that you say what you observe and then you say what you like.
Yes.
And from that, the author can extrapolate what it is they want. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
just become very good at that kind of feedback.
Right.
I even do it with my students. I don't think they notice that there's no criticism. They
Right.
create the criticism themselves.
Mhm.
So that's what I learned that I think, you know, changed how I write, but also how I am in community with other writers.
Yeah,
Huh.
as you say, film school, the former is kind of like how they like to do it. Beat you
Mhm.
down, all the rest of the stuff. And I refuse. I refuse to do that. It's one of those things. I've never seen a writer gain anything of worth by being beaten down. You can observe, like you said, like you can observe, give them offering choices, and then
Mhm.
allow them to, if they have questions, to be able to figure out where they're deficient. Right. But you are absolutely correct. That I think that is the most toxic aspect of criticism from other
Mhm.
writers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. The poem "The Amateur Gardener Considers a Time of Death." See, now that's a good title right there. Was
Yes.
reprinted by Down East Magazine, which is very main, very white audience publication. What does it mean that for this particular poem to land in that particular space?
I think readers who were not prepared to understand that as a poem about the protests of 2020
Mm-hmm.
can delude themselves into believing that it's not a poem about the protests of 2020. Um, but it is it's a poem that has it's done in couplets, but they're uneven couplets. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got a long one and a short one, and it's about essentially like the action of the poem is rehousing some plants.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got words in there that give you a sense that that the natural imagery is doing something more political, more social than just it being a tomato plant. So if
Right.
you can certainly think of that poem as about like the death of the plants. But it would be it would be an anemic reading.
Right. The most literal reading on her face this earth.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I am okay with that audience thinking, "Oh, maybe she's not a great poet because they don't see the multiplicity in that." But I'm glad it was reprinted there in part
yeah.
because it gives folks an opportunity. But if they don't take that opportunity, that's not up to me.
Yeah, that's one of the poems that like 5 years later they reread and then they
Yeah.
go, "Oh, now I know what she was talking about." Things
Yeah.
like that. You know, I always say, I can control my writing, I can't control my reader.
Right.
So like there. All right, your poetry has appeared in the Prairie Schooner, which is very very prestigious. Uh, Diode is a Diode, I think. Black Renaissance Noir and the Langston Hughes Review. By the way, I am modeled everything after Langston Hughes. We named our child Langston. Okay, I love me some Langston Hughes, among others. Which journal publishing your work felt like you most arrived, somewhere you were trying to reach?
Oh, so each one for a different reason.
Mhm.
Prairie Schooner because I was like, Kwame Dawes has read my work.
Oh
Y'all
yeah.
can't tell me anything. Me and Kwame is besties now. We're gonna be sipping margaritas somewhere. Um,
And
Diode.
that's actually gonna happen.
So yeah, I mean, eventually.
Yeah.
Diode. It was because they also nominated me for a push card.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, Black Renaissance Noir because um, Quincy. Oh man, Quincy Troop.
Uh huh.
Quincy selected those.
Wow.
And those were the first pieces ever published. Those were published a while ago when I was
Wow.
in graduate school.
Wow.
And
That's
then Langston Hughes, those are folks who knew me as a scholar first.
yeah.
And so when they published, they were like, "Oh, okay, you doing?
look,
We
look at you
see
pulling
you."
out. Look at you pulling out the pallets.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I see you.
I
I
think,
see you.
yeah, I
Now,
think
let me
each.
ask you a question on that, though. Let me ask you a
Yeah.
question on that. Was there any? Because the academic, realm is a little bit different. I try to explain this. Oftentimes, I get academic writers who say, "I want to write mainstream," and then they just say, "I'm going to take what I wrote in academics." I'm like, "That's not how it kind of works."
Mm, no.
But the academic world can be a little bit, how can I say,
Cutthroat.
cutthroat. There you go. Was there any like resentment about the fact that you had actually demonstrated kind of a multi-talented. You basically flexed more than just your academic work. You flexed a creative side that I sometimes believe that a lot of academics really had. Was there any resentment or any kind of like, you know?
I I haven't experienced it, but I also will say that I've not cultivated the kind of reputation where someone would feel comfortable saying to my face that they have difficulty with that, because I would make sure they know that's their difficulty and not mine. Um,
Exactly.
I think there's something about I made the choice um, as a graduate student, because I have a disability and because there's so
Mm-hmm.
many reasons why I can't really hide my body, my feelings, my sense of where I am and what I'm doing. Because I can't hide those, I chose not to do any kind of performance. I wasn't going to perform being nice. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
going to perform being especially coquettish or prim.
Yeah.
And so saying it how I felt it with, appropriate cushions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to tamp down on any sort of Sagittarius fire that was coming anybody's way. And
You're
so
getting the smoke.
I mean, yeah, because I'm like, if if you want to say that, be prepared for what comes back at you.
Yeah.
And again, New Jersey, like there's no sugarcoating, right? This is
Right.
not a bakery,
Right.
right? Like, so, I think I don't know if folks are resentful. I don't know if they're jealous. I don't know if they're upset. I've experienced nothing but support from the people who are in my circle.
Cohort. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. And folks who I didn't know were watching who were really pleased to see it. So
Yeah.
that's been a real blessing.
Awesome.
Maybe those folks are out there, but as Megan says, none of these folks finna say it to my face.
And if
All
I
right?
ain't heard it to my face, it don't exist.
It doesn't exist.
All right.
But
Let me go
also,
to
and
the.
I'll say this too
Oh
before
yeah.
we
Go
say
ahead.
this one. What people think about me is not really my business
Right.
because
Yeah.
it usually doesn't have much to do with who I actually am.
Yeah. It's the
It's
persona that
yeah,
they would be saying. Yeah. That's kind of hard, by the way, for some authors to understand. Some authors actually, and you can oftentimes see authors who go out thinking that they're just going to be them normal selves, and then they're going to go out there and everything going to be fine. I'm like, no, 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 no. Your persona of who you
hmm
are is the thing that people interact with. Your normal self is the thing, you drop your clothes in the middle of the floor. People don't want to see that.
right,
Right? And
right,
you need to protect that version of them, by the way.
yeah,
All right, next question. We're almost done. I think we have three more questions.
yeah.
Library Journal called this the most powerful exploration of storytelling and Black experiences. Down East called it formally and linguistically inventive. When you read other people's descriptions of your own book, which one gets it closest to what you actually made?
I think both of those make sense to me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, sometimes when you read a review, you're like, oh, that is not what I was striving for, but I'm glad that someone sees that aspect of the thing.
Right.
We've been talking all along about what readers do.
Yeah.
And because people come to poetry with their own backstories, they're looking for very different things.
Right.
So, it was my aim to be, linguistically Black. But
Right.
I understand how for a Down East audience that translates to linguistically inventive.
Right.
Um, I think, for a library journal, it's an exploration. For me, it's a diving in.
Yeah.
Um, so, I don't think those are inaccurate, but I also think that they are touching on a facet that's resonant with the readers that they're talking to.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to quick on these last ones. You won a citywide writing contest
Ah.
at. See, I'm gonna bring it on. At 5 years old, on the subject of why am I proud to be an African American? What did the 5 year old Therí know about the subject that you're trying to say, even as you get to the age of 50ish, or we ain't gonna say your age or anything like that, but
Oh no,
we're
I. I mean, the first poem in the collection tells you what my birthday is. So December 16, 1984. I am 41, be 42, and at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean that essay was what, 2 paragraphs long. I wrote it with my big pencil.
Hey,
And
that was a status symbol back in the day,
it
though.
really was. I had a big, and I was holding it, and I was writing. And we didn't have a pencil sharpener at home, so my father was sharpening it with a
Nice.
knife.
Yep.
And so I was there, and I was at the wooden table, and I'm writing this, and I the the kernel of that essay is some 5-year-old understanding of resilience without having that word to hold on
Mm-hmm.
to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 41-year-old me, maybe even 50-year-old me, when she arrives, would switch out African American for Black,
Right. Right.
um, and also would likely also talk about something akin to joy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in addition to resilience, and something about resistance.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I also think I'd add currently, um, that I am particularly proud of being a Black person because I don't aspire to all of the negative, callous strictures of what whiteness requires. Like
Yeah.
whiteness requires of white people a ugliness that
Mm-hmm.
I do not aspire to. And
Right.
so I think that is also why I'm proud to be a Black person.
Yeah. Especially when you realize, no, 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 this is good enough. This right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
This is the beautiful part. This is the fun part.
Yeah.
So, next question. You run a developmental editing and sensitivity reading business called Inquiry Editing. God bless you to do editing.
I'm still taking clients. I love this part of what I do.
God bless you. Editors who love editing, God bless you. I believe writers write and editors edit and hey, do what you need to do. What is the most common thing writers, especially Black writers, get wrong when they try to write across disability?
I think they don't focus on the detail of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So very often writing about disability for fiction writers and for essayists, they write about disability at a remove. So they're the parent of a child or the sibling or they're the child and they're dealing with their parent. And so the disability is the occasion for speaking about something related to them
Yeah.
or something related to the healthcare system. There's a really beautiful essay by Gerald Walker called Breathe,
Right.
about how gentrification and um, and redlining affects his son's access to treatment. Um, and what I think that does, that disability at a remove, is it takes away the possibility of looking at the details of what disability requires. So
Mm-hmm.
there are accommodations in my home that people think of as quirky, but they are accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
Disability is expensive. I don't
Right.
drive, right?
Right.
So, someone's like, "Oh, you require a limo from your house to the airport." And I'm like, yeah, well, a car service, when you pay them and you're actually paying for the service, means that they won't damage my scooter or they won't scratch my luggage like a Uber driver. And because I pay them enough, they will arrive on time and I will get to the airport on time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
that's not a luxury, right? That's a
Right.
necessity. Um, so I think that's the details sometimes are missing. And then for Black disabled writers, I think because we have the burden, opportunity, privilege of representation, we often pull toward the figurative and the sort of broader implications of the experience. And Kiese Layman says this a lot, but like, what room are you in?
Right. Right. Right.
What's surrounding you? What's the sensorium?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for folks who are thinking about it academically, position disability as part of a litany of identities and
Mm-hmm.
not a vector of power.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are some of the things that I hope folks start attending to. But there are some folks who get it right. So, there's that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, well, look at at
Right.
you. All right. You are this close to surviving the 20 questions of the right shade. And the final question is this. Last question, like I said, and we mean this literally. If you can write one more poem tonight, knowing it would be read by exactly the right person at the right time, the right moment, what is it about, and who is the person reading it?
Mm. Mm. I think that poem might be about the frisson of being touched, like
Mm.
what it is to be touched with intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
um, touched deliberately, touched with care.
Mm-hmm.
In part because that's a rarity. I think even for people who have more social activity than me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the person reading it might be someone who's longing for that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the overall, I don't know, mood of maybe the third collection. This is kind of this is the space I'm in at this point. At this point.
that, that is awesome. And again, thank you so much for coming on the right shade. I so
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Now, to everyone, y'all look, Dr. Pickens gave y'all about an hour and a half worth of gems. Okay. So, like I said, when it comes to the right shade, this is a platform to platform Black writers, Black authors, Black academics, but we need to support them. My viewpoint is that Black books will be dead if we don't do this proactively and intentionally. What are the three things that you can do with a Black book that you purchase? You can read it. Cool. That's great. You can gift it if you don't feel like reading. That's great. Or you can do like I do, which is to buy it, put it on your shelf, like Dr. Pickens has behind there, and then look smart. Okay. So then you can start understanding words.
Like Callum Sestina.
Yeah, I still know what he was saying. So you can start going and learning from people who are smarter than you, and that's my point. Black books have to be purchased. Black books can't be thought about, as my Texas grandfather said, fixing and finning. You can't be fixing to buy it and finning to buy it. You have to buy. So the links are all below. Go out there and do it. Dr. Pickens, I just want to say thank you again. Again, I am very
You.
proud. I don't care if it embarrasses you. I am so proud of you. And don't let me just say, in Maine, we want to make sure that when we check in a year from now, you still healthy, you still
Yes.
doing your thing. But if you ever need the back signal, I'll throw up a cap in the air. And I'll come out there and go get you.
We need chairs. Yes.
Yeah, we got chairs, and we'll even find somebody to swim across the river. So thanks so much again. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
All
so
right
much.
then. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy that interview? Great. Check out our playlist of 20 questions, and you're going to discover new Black authors, or our 10 fave Black books from celebrities who tell you what they are reading.